Ric Grenell is joining us now. Before we get into the discussion, this is our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, talking about the potential for the Chinese, that our intelligence is indicated to the U.S., are considering to begin potentially providing lethal aid to the Russians in their war against Ukraine. Take a listen, Bite 28.
We are concerned that China is considering supporting Russia's war effort in Ukraine with lethal assistance. As President Biden said, going back many months when the aggression first took place, and he spoke to President Xi Jinping, he told him at that point that there would be real consequences in our own relationship were China to provide lethal assistance to Russia in this aggression against Ukraine.
I'm sure Xi Jinping is shaking his boots right now, worrying about that Joe Biden's administration is going to do nothing if Russia gets weapons from China. I mean, who are we kidding? First of all, we've given the Ukrainians $139 billion. We're very good at giving out aid there. Not so great to the folks in Ohio that need it right now. You know, go to Kyiv. Don't go to East Palestine. Why do that? So I'm going to ask Ric Grenell, because you've handled this on the international stage. First of all, what is the end game? I'm trying to figure out the Ukraine end game right now. And this intel, they say and this is right in your neighborhood. The intel is reporting that China is going to fund the Russians militarily. The intel, I don't know if this is the same intel, by the way, that had to shoot down Mylar balloons over the Yukon, but be that as it may, what's your take on this at this point?
Look, we have a problem here because, first of all, we have a State Department that is talking about war and not talking about peace. We have a State Department that's not putting forward diplomatic solutions, ideas, and forcing the parties into some sort of talk and compromise. It seems like all of Washington is just fanning the flames of war, and that's my big concern. Now, what we have is the Americans are put into a corner where the Chinese are saying, go mind your own business. Don't tell us what to do on foreign policy. And by the way, you're arming the Ukrainians. Let us pick who we want to arm. So the escalation is real, Jay. We have to understand that this is headed towards an even bigger world war. And therefore, we need to have some options of an off-ramp. We need to have the State Department doing something with people who want to avoid war, some ideas. I'm not calling for a weak agreement. I'm calling for a strong agreement, but we need at least options. No, not everyone should be just rushing to war and making it worse.
I think this is what the American people, Rick, are upset about. It's if you question any of the support, you're a Russian agent. That's the talking point in Washington, D.C. And it's not even a Republican-Democrat thing. It's kind of a swamp versus average Americans. And we've seen that time and time again, this narrative for years. They use it against President Trump even before he was president. It's always Russia, Russia, Russia. But now even just saying what we just talked about, which is I think most Americans would be fine sending this money, even when we're facing a lot of serious issues in our own country, if the administration could tell us how they would like to see this come to an end. I mean, so far, we are talking about what's going to happen next year right now in this conflict. So no one is even providing hopes of a conclusion. If you bring that up, like maybe we should tie that to the money that we're sitting over, you're a Russian spy.
Yeah, look, I view this thing as the president of the United States gets to have a whole bunch of tools in their tool belt, so to speak. And they have the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, and they also have the State Department. And so both should be providing options. I'm certainly not suggesting that we let communist ideas overtake us. I certainly understand very clear-eyed that Russia is a problem. But I think that there's a way to be able to, as the United States of America, be able to promote peace and prepare for war. But I only see us preparing for war. I don't see us promoting peace. I don't see Antony Blinken getting on a plane and going to capitals in Europe and getting European foreign ministers all to sit down with Putin and Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. Look, I'm clear-eyed that this is difficult. It's going to be incredibly hard to try to get the Russians to back off. We should have been doing this a long time ago. The longer it goes on, the worse it gets and the more difficult it gets. But try.
You know, Rick, I'm holding in my hand, and we'll put it up on the screen, our letter that we sent. We're going to move our attention to the Middle East here, to the United Nations. And because you were there for many, many years, a decade almost, at the UN. Of course, you were the ambassador to Germany as well as director of national intelligence. There was a planned move of resolutions coming, which happen all the time in the Security Council by the Palestinian Authority against Israel. The United States said they were going to veto it, which that part I'm glad with. I'm pleased they were going to veto it, only because the pressure on the Biden administration was so enormous. But what's interesting here is we saw tremendous. I think one of the biggest accomplishments of your administration was the change in the Middle East, the Abraham Accords. And I mean, it just totally revolutionized the way the Middle East was engaging with each other, including the fact that you didn't have to solve the Palestinian conflict, which is insufferable, unfortunately. It just goes on and on and on. It's an industry right now, to be quite frank, in the West Bank, in these areas, in Gaza. It's an industry. And they call these refugee camps that have been around for 60 years. But, Rick, the thing that I was going to ask you is, the Abraham Accords worked, and this administration won't go near it.
Look, as you know, I spent 8 years at the UN inside the Security Council. I know this cycle that the Palestinians and some in the Arab group constantly bring up. And, you know, they're smart because they bring it up when we're distracted on other issues, like during Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, now with Ukraine. They try to sneak things in. I believe that what Trump did with the Abraham Accords was historic because the Arab group, many of our Arab allies, recognized that just all of this talk about the Palestinian problems was a smokescreen for some of the real problems. And when you went in and you tried to solve some of these problems and promoted peace between Israel and Arab nations, it worked and they jumped on it. And so the Palestinian smokescreen, I think, was really not working during the Trump administration. Well, today, now, this week, we had them try to move again to condemn Israel for settlement issues. And look, I'm pretty strong on this. I don't think we should be telling Israel how to do zoning. I don't think that we should be telling Israel about local laws when it comes to building permits. Imagine if someone tried to do that to us. Stay away from telling Israel how to conduct its zoning and local building codes. I just don't agree that we should be doing it.
But they've seen the success, though. I mean, you got to be ignorant to not see the success of the Abraham Accords. So I asked myself, this worked. You see the success, but it's because it was your administration. We're not going to do it. It's like this knee-jerk reaction they have.
Look, and I think we should also point out that the intelligence community briefed Donald Trump and the National Security Advisor. And the intelligence community assessment was that if you moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, you'd create World War III. Not only were they wrong about creating World War III, they were completely wrong because it did the opposite. It actually created peace, not war.
That was the greatest growth of Middle East stability. Because in the Middle East, you want stability, was the Abraham Accords. And I think that was one of the great triumphs of that. And I know you worked on it, Rick. We did too. I mean, it was just it was the right strategy. It worked, and it paid great dividends. And I think, Jordan, we're letting it go, and I hate to see that.
Yeah, and for partisan politics. So it's like they either act like it doesn't exist, it never happened, and then it's like they're pouring fuel on the fire. So even with preventing this UN vote from occurring, they threaten the Israelis. And Rick, I mean, the final question is they kind of they fuel the fire by saying, but if they do this, then you know what? These other Gulf state countries, who knows what they're going to do with their relationship with Israel? What we knew in the past that if they just let the countries work together, good things would happen.
As great as the Abraham Accords were, I think it was a low point for U.S. intelligence. They completely got it wrong, and they burned a lot of their credibility. I think that we need to come clean and be honest about how wrong we got it in the intelligence community. That will only help to fix it, and to recognize that many Arab governments want to have peace with Israel, and we've got to be able to facilitate this peace. As you know, there are a couple of other governments in the Middle East that want to sign, that we're close to signing, and so there's more to do, and the Biden team should recognize that, but they aren't.
No, we appreciate it, Rick. Thanks for being with us as always. Thanks for your insight.